Some of you may become somewhat uncomfortable as parts of this film unfold, but I think if you listen carefully...
Nature has intended that every appropriate
A healthy, happy sex life is the most wonderful and exciting. We've all experienced curiosity about ourselves and the opposite sex. Who hasn't?
Hello, my lovelies. I'm Megan.
I'm Marcella.
And I'm Colin.
And
welcome to Remedial Sex
Ed. Woo. So today we are having a book club review.
Book club.
The three of us decided to pick up and read The Joy of Sex.
Should we call it a book report because school?
Ooh, I hear you.
Yeah?
What's your take on that, Miss Peretta?
I love it.
Okay, good.
All right. So this is The Joy of Sex. It's the original version was written by Dr. Comfort. The one that we read was the edited version that was released in 2008.
Yes.
And it had edits and contributions from Dr. Susan Quilliman added to it.
Quilliam.
So a reason why I kind of pushed for us to read this first is, did either of you back in the late 2000s watch I Heart the 70s on VH1 by any chance?
Not the 70s, but the 90s.
Nice. Did you watch the one with like the creepy baby in the 90s where they had the...
Yeah, the dancing
Nirvana
baby
baby.
animation.
Yeah.
It's a classic.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I was obsessed with the, like, I Heart the Decades shows that VH1 did.
Those were really fun. They were like the BuzzFeed article of back then, of the early 2000s.
Yeah.
Of the mid 2000s.
Did you see that they're doing it again and it's on Netflix?
I did not.
I did not.
Well, I guess, I don't know. It's probably not the same people, but they are doing decades shows on
is.
Netflix right now.
Oh.
Is it because I've seen the various ones that CNN has done, which is
is it
definitely
those?
like the serious version of the decades.
Oh, is that what they are? I don't know.
I'm not so
Again,
much into the serious version.
I'm scrolling past that and getting to terrible TV shows like Lost Girl, so...
What's that?
Just a succubus trying to find her place in the world.
Cool.
The I Heart the Decade shows on VH1 definitely, if you've never seen it, had a very comedic flair to it. And the one I'm referring to was I Heart the 70s Part 2. And I guess Part 2 of the 70s, they didn't talk about Watergate, they didn't talk about Star Wars, but they did talk about the Poseidon Adventure. And they talked about the Mary Tyler Moore Show. Mm-hmm. And they talked about this book. So, The Joy of Sex came out in 1972. It sold millions upon millions of copies, and it was on the New York Times bestseller list for 11 weeks straight, 52 weeks total.
Wow, really? Is that a whole year?
I have longer. I have that it was 11 weeks as the top seller and 70 weeks in the top 5.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's kind of unclear as to who actually wrote the words that you read because it's credited to Dr. Alex Comfort, but a review I'm reading from the original publication in 75 says that there were 2 ghost authors, 2 physicians, a man and a woman.
I mean, if you look at the original cover from the 1972 version, it does very specifically say edited by Alex Comfort instead of by him.
Yeah.
To people who have never read or heard of this book, it is a spoof of the joy of cooking and treating sexual relations as kind of a selection of entrees that you can enjoy.
It's a cookbook.
It's a cookbook for sex. And that's exactly how it's structured. So, like, the different chapters are called things like ingredients, appetizers, main courses, and the final section is called sauces and pickles. And the different phases, like, ingredients kind of talks about basics, like how a man gets aroused, what pubic hair is, like talking about fidelity and tenderness and desire and lust. And then you get into things like appetizers, which has a lot to do with seduction and kind of sexual interactions that are non-penetrative. Main courses it's an exact walkthrough of various sexual positions you can do. And the sausage and pickles really have to do with kinks and various ways you can get your kicks off that aren't the missionary position.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A little more adventurous stuff.
Yeah. So in the original 1972 version of the book, the illustrations for the various positions were these infamous hand-drawn drawings.
The hairy man.
He is like the most 1970s man you will ever
He's
see.
very hairy.
He is like if Colin never got a haircut ever again and was like a deep brunette man.
He looks a little bit like Commander William Riker.
He does. Like if if Riker went a little bit crazier with the haircut.
Yeah, if he wasn't so clean cut.
Mm-hmm. And then the woman that he's with very infamously has hairy armpits, has a completely overgrown bush, and is just living her best 1970s life.
Mm-hmm.
Like, who cares about hair removal? Like, we're here to just get down. And ultimately, there were a lot of things in the original cut of The Joy of Sex that people found, I don't know, like, I think from the different excerpts that I've read of the OG cut, there's things like they would really promote swingers parties, because remember, it's the 70s. And he did an entire section about how having sex on a motorbike is a fun idea.
In motion.
In motion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty wild. Doesn't make it to the 2008 edition.
No.
Yeah, 2008 got a little too safe for me, but that's fine.
It did, yeah, it seemed a little tame.
And so, basically, this version of the 1970 book, it didn't get edited or updated until 1991. And they talk about this in the 2008 version, and it sounds like the main edits in the 91 edition was to take out things like swingers parties and group sex, and it mostly had to do with the AIDS crisis. Was the explanation they gave in the book.
Yeah, that's what I was reading.
Wasn't that in the 80s?
Well. Mm-hmm.
Wasn't that for the 80s re-release?
No, it was released in 91.
Oh, 90s, got it.
Yeah. And then in 2008 edition, which is the one we read, they kind of talk about it again. They still seem to throw a lot of shade at it. Like, the way they phrase it is like, swingers parties were a thing in the 70s, and group sex is a thing now, but, I mean, it's not the same. That's kind of how I read that.
Yeah, I will. It's fine. Listener, I'm being very quiet because I, Marcella Peretta, have never been angrier at a book before. So yeah, they seemed, yep. Anyway, 2008, safe.
This book, when it was re-released in 2008, I was reading an article from NPR, which dates back to when it was re-released. So Alex Comfort had unfortunately been dead for about 8 years, so he had no say in the second or third publication. Fourth? Hold on, I'm looking at the front to see how many times it was republished.
I think it's like 4 or 5.
Yeah.
No, 4, because then there was the pocket Joy of Sex in the 80s.
Okay. So, anyway, with the 2008 version, that's when Susan Quilliman gets involved. And according to NPR, most of this book is still the OG version. It says that they probably only cut out about 10%.
Yeah.
And
sorry, go ahead, Megan.
Well, what they credit Susan with adding is her take on the female orgasm, because that was one of the original high criticisms of the 1970 version, is that it was so obviously written by a man who doesn't really know.
Yeah.
So she took a second stab at it. I have a lot of spicy takes on what her views on the female orgasm are.
1000%, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's kind of my intro into this whole thing.
She's also been credited. She's the one who really added like pornography and was like quote unquote destigmatizing all of that. So that's another thing that she contributed to the book. And I feel as though while I was reading it, I could tell when she had interjected something. So it was like 90% the original author, and then all of a sudden a paragraph that would directly contradict the opening paragraph of that chapter would end the chapter. And I was like, oh, you tried to make it balanced between the male and female perspective, but like also did not take enough liberty.
You can tell that they didn't, the editor wasn't very gung-ho about editing this book or even updating it for the 21st century.
And I also don't know how much of that was that in order for this to be published, they did check with Alex Comfort's son. Like, he had to give the final approval. So who knows what the politics around that might have been to try and give her credit. Maybe. Because it was just so painful to read as a woman.
One thing she did add into the book, and I think it's interesting because, you know, before we record these episodes, whether it translates or not, the three of us actually text each other.
Yes, I did.
Quite frequently.
And one of Marcella's spicier takes that I thought was hilarious had to do with how the book handles hair removal. And that was something that Susan directly added to the book. And I know that for a fact because in the original publishing, whether it was Alex Comfort or not, very adamant about how a woman should not shave her body hair.
Right.
Especially underneath the armpits. And that's kind of what made the original illustrations infamous.
Yeah.
And it was on this, like, one of the earlier chapters in Ingredients talks about being attracted to another person's natural scent. Mm-hmm. And their argument was if you remove the armpit hair, then you remove the natural scent, and it messes with the whole art of seduction.
And don't use deodorant. Because you got to produce all those pheromones.
Because the 70s.
Because of the 70s.
Yeah. These are some of the spicier takes that it has to say on hair. In terms of body hair, some women are turned on by a fair amount of masculine body hair because it looks virile. Others are turned off by it because it looks animal. This seems to be a matter of attitude. I agree with that. I mean, a man's chest hair, women, all sorts of women have different takes on that.
Sure.
Yeah, sure. Pubic hair. Shave it off if you prefer. Some people do. If you do shave it once, you are, however, committed to a prickly interregnum while it grows. Some, nowadays, prefer it off in the interest of fashion or total nudity, or prefer the hardness of the bare pubis. Others find it decorative and regard it as a resource. Try brushing it lightly and learn to caress with it. It can be combed, twirled, kissed, held, even pulled. In the woman, it can move the whole pubis skillfully handled to the point of orgasm. As a halfway house, she can trim it creatively, confining the triangle to the middle of the pubis with a bare strip each side, Brazilian style, removing hair that comes outside of a G-string or a swimsuit, or trimming enough to make the vulva fully visible. One myth that has proved remarkably persistent is that you can tell whether a blonde is natural from the color of her pubic hair. In reality, it's often several shades darker than head hair. Consequently, in black-haired women, it can be nearly blue.
Pause. So all of that was for women. Sorry. Continue, Megan.
Men can shave it if they like, or if their partners like, but it's difficult to shave the scrotum.
Because it's so easy to shave a vagina. Sorry. Sorry.
He may need to shave the penile shaft and root to use condoms. Otherwise, the hairs can get caught. And I've actually heard, Colin, that hurts like a bitch. Getting a condom snug in a pubic hair.
I've never had it. Never had it happen.
Oh. Really?
Not that I can recall, no.
Oh, never mind. Okay.
I'm sure it does happen, though.
It does.
It has.
This can produce sharp pain at a time when he should be experiencing intense pleasure. So that is the part
The
that's
end.
kind of bullshit.
The end. That was it. That's all for men. That one paragraph. Did you hear everything else Megan said? All of that was for women. That one paragraph for men. Also, it's super easy to shave a vagina. Ugh!
Super easy, no danger at all.
I'm so angry.
So, okay, let's just dive into all the ways this book makes us angry. Because we literally broke the seal removing pubic hair.
Yep.
And so I knew this book was gonna make Marcella angry the second I started reading it, because it is this book is the most heteronormative sex book I've ever read in my entire life.
It is very that.
Okay, so that's not even my biggest issue with the book, because the book starts out clearly saying that it is heteronormative. It's like, hey, this is specifically for heterosexuals who are in monogamous, loving relationships with their partners. Cool, great. That's your target audience. Fine. Whatever. It doesn't represent everybody, but you can't, whatever. That's your experience. Cool. Talk from your experience. Great. The misogyny and it's like, even Sauce and Pickles is not kink friendly.
No, it's not.
It's not. Like, you guys described it as kink when we were going through the ingredients, and I get that that's like the easiest way to describe what that section is supposed to be, but it is not. Like, I just... sorry, go ahead. What?
Okay, I want to skip ahead to something in the Sauce and Pickles that definitely definitely tickled me with some of the wronger things in this book. If we turn to page 214 of the 2008 edition of Joy of Sex.
Who's the publisher?
Octopus Publishing Group Limited.
Nice.
Japanese style. Intercourse on the floor or on cushions, as with most oriental styles, partial nakedness only. Numerous squatting and semi-squatting positions, a lot of bondage, a lot of preoccupation with extras and odd devices. See ticklers. We are talking here about the sexual customs known from 18th and early 19th century Japanese prints. What would be hard to copy is the essentially Japanese mixture of violence and formality, which does not sit easily with our tradition of tenderness.
Your tradition of tenderness.
Because Western culture is so known for tenderness in sex. And not, like, marrying off 12-year-olds to your business partner.
Oh my god. Like, overlooking the fact that they said the word oriental.
I am so speechless about so much of this book.
Yeah.
Like, the fact that anytime you have essentially a series of white people talking about any other culture that is not white people, it's never, ever, ever, ever gonna be good.
No, it's not great, is it?
No.
It's like so obviously white, Christian, male, heteronormative America that I was just like, oh, also, readers, Megan totally led me astray. When I was texting her being like, this is the worst thing I've ever read, why are you making me do this? What is happening? It sounded like she, like, supported the book, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna keep reading, I'm gonna keep believing that it's gonna get better, and now I'm getting her opinion, and I'm like, oh, okay, we're all on the same page, it's awful!
Like, Colin and I, it took us a long time to actually, like, dive into some of the parts of this book, because we are a heterosexual married couple.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Right, we are sort of the target demographic for this book. I would
think
argue
we're exactly the target. Or maybe not exactly.
We're not exactly, because I would like to believe that you and I are more woke than a lot of this book.
Yeah, this is made for, like, your stereotypical
Like,
having sex with a hole in the sheet type couple.
I mean,
oh my god, I'm so glad to hear you guys say this. I really was scared as to my spicy take on all of this. And I was like, am I going to offend them?
no.
I mean, we
not.
did have, to the book's credit,
To the book's credit,
we had fun flipping through it as a couple and, like, getting some ideas and, you know, just looking for fun stuff to do. But it was like nothing revelatory, and it was very clearly made for, I would say, white, hetero, middle class, married couples, specifically for them, and everyone else was excluded almost to a fault.
What I will give this book credit for is if you search through it with your partner and you're looking for inspiration, it can lead you down a different path. I would not take these sauces and pickles of like, this is exactly how you should do it. I think it's just a list. Oh, sorry, table. Sorry. I think the sauce and pickle section is just a list of options out there. And if you're interested in any of those options, find a better book.
That's what I was going to say. I will not even give it that. I will not give this book that. I found it boring. I didn't find anything interesting. There are much better books if you want to learn sexual positions and things. I give it nothing.
Like, Colin and I did have there were some things in here that did be like, hey, I forgot about that as a thing.
Yeah, I can't remember specifically what, though, but we did have some fun times.
The slow masturbation, I think, inspired me a little bit. It's just, I can see, as a married couple who's been with someone for a certain amount of time, you kind of get in a routine after a while, and I could see where the book has its purpose in breaking routine. However, I hypothesize that if you got one of those, like, sex charts that you can get at any sex store, or, like, a small little book of different sexual positions, it would have the same effect.
You would be way better off. I'm, like, throwing it down right now.
Yeah, you would miss all the gender essentialism and weirdness. This book has such a bizarre tone because it's like misogynistic, but in a second wave feminist kind of way. It seems like it has all these nods to gender essentiality and like a sort of pseudo-medical biological take on what it means to be a man and or a woman that is like very unique to the time in which it was written. Sort of entrenched misogyny with like some of the language of second wave feminism that was so popular at that time.
I think which is interesting is the time frame that this book was released in the 70s. There was, American sexuality ebbs and flows when you look at it in a historical sense. Like, the decades kind of go in and out of each other.
Yeah, they do.
And how Americans view sex totally varies what time frame you're talking about. What I find fascinating about the 70s is it was a sexual time, but if you watch any kind of comedic movie from the 70s, and I'm talking about your National Lampoon movies or your Kentucky Fried movies. Oh, I forget. I think it is called the Kentucky Fried Movie.
Yeah.
Like any of those, it's
Porky's.
Always very objectifying of the women.
Yes.
Like, it's very it's sexual, but all from a male's perspective every single time.
Yeah, and I think that's a pretty good characterization of the sexual, quote unquote, sexual revolution that happened in the mid 20th century in America. That it was not it wasn't a revolution from the ground up. It was more of a revolution of how we perceive sex that ended up just supporting entrenched ideas about sex. Like, it didn't really subvert the structure of misogyny and heteronormativity. It just made it okay for men to have sex in different and more interesting ways. Yeah. Like, it didn't really it didn't upend it. It didn't change anything.
And this is like another characterization of that is the fact that it's joy of sex, and then the other book is joy of gay sex. All of it is about penises and penetration. That is the entire perspective of this whole, I'm angry. Like, it was just, and that's true of the sexual revolution as well, because so much of the storytelling that we're seeing, aka don't even get me started on that recent movie about the Stonewall riots, like, it was all from the white male perspective. And you know what? there were a bunch of others of us that were also trying to get some shit done at that time, and I can't. I'm so angry.
Yeah, this book is all
Everything is about penises. Literal quote from the book. Penetration is the most powerful, unifying sexual act. You know what? No. No. If you guys want to go into misogyny, I have 5 quotes from the book that I would really like to share so that I can just release some anger. The chapter on oral sex for her pleasure, being the first to broach the subject of oral sex, talks about all the taboo around it and the positions to do it. In contrast, the opening section for the chapter on oral sex for his pleasure is good mouthwork on her part is perhaps one of the most valued gifts a woman can give to a man and well worth practicing the technique. So they did not once say that like men should practice for women in the for her section at all. They were just like, dudes, do these things, cure positions, chicks. You need to work on this because it's the greatest thing that you can do for your man.
Get yourself a popsicle and really work it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go down to the stick.
Yeah. And then it's immediately followed by the handwork section, which, again, is like, handwork is like how the sexual awakening really starts with yourself, with your partners. All true. Yeah, absolutely. Great. Tells the guy, like, the chapter that it actually, like, starts getting into, you know, guys, you should do this for her pleasure, opens with, like, watch how she masturbates herself and watch out for neglecting the labia. Like, cool. Great. Sexual pleasure for him chapter. The first sentence. A woman who has the divine gift of lechery and loves her partner will masturbate him well. And a woman who knows how to masturbate a man subtly, unhurriedly, and mercilessly will almost always make a superlative partner. That's it. That's all I have to do to be a superlative partner is know how to give a hand job.
Okay, can we also talk for a little bit how the book sold female masturbation as for the male gaze only? That's just a whole bunch of bullshit right there.
And that's in one of the chapters that you liked, Megan. Also, the chapter that Megan was like, this one gave me some ideas is the what's it called? Long masturbation for him and long masturbation for her or something. The chapter that Megan is referencing, those are the last 2 chapters. So the time that Megan got an idea is at the end of the book when it's like, have fun, explore your bodies. And I'm like, cool, why did we read the first entire book?
There's a difference between a sex book and a human sexuality book. Like a human sexuality book you have to read and it's factual and it's, you know, it's kind of got more of a scientific notation to it. A sex book is like there to kind of explore different funky ideas and like there'll be pictures of different positions and it's intended to inspire you to get it on. And there have been other sex books that we could recommend that are a lot more efficient in this way. But the way I've always read sex books is just kind of like skimming. Like I look for the picture that I want and then I kind of focus in on that.
Well, I also think that's how the book is intended to be read.
Yeah.
You know, I read everything.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you for your service.
And it just built. I talked to people that I met that day about how much I hated this book. I was so comfortable being like, yeah, I'm reading this book called Joy of Sex, and it does all of these horrible things. So, yeah. I raged against the machine.
I think, Colin, you also did the same thing, and you do this, like, of just kind of skimming everything. And I found that you were fixated on this section here.
I read the foreword. Oh yeah, it keeps coming back. No, it wasn't just this one section, because it keeps showing up like in reference throughout the entire book is the big toe on the clitoris maneuver.
Okay,
which
yes.
this book keeps talking about and seems, I mean, it might feel good, but it seems extremely gross to me.
I mean, like, whatever. I have dated people who have foot fetishes. Like, I am, like, this is, sure, cool, feet are totally a part of it. That's great. Do I think that I would ever orgasm off of a big toe? No. Do I think that the guy who wrote it thinks that he made a girl orgasm off of his big toe? Yeah, I think he does. Do I think he did it? No, I think he didn't.
She just wanted him to stop and faked it.
She was like, I came. Please,
Okay,
please stop.
Do something else.
Also, he was really into putting his penis between a pair of breasts. Like, that came up everywhere.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to read, it does also specify, here's what it says. I didn't even realize this the first time I read it. The pad of the male big toe applied to the clitoris or vulva generally is a magnificent erotic instrument. So you forget about the female big toe also, or anybody else's big toe. Apparently it has to be a phallic big toe if you want to pleasure a woman.
Absolutely.
Which I find completely bizarre, but of course in keeping with the tone of the book.
There's going to be no inclusivity in this book.
You know what pisses me off the most, though, is that I read the foreword from both authors, Comfort and Quilliam. And Quilliam, in the 2008 edition, pays some lip service to inclusivity, and she specifically talks about elderly or disabled people who might have trouble with some of the more acrobatic positions that are mentioned in the book. But it only goes to the level of lip service. What she says is essentially like, if you are elderly or physically disabled and would have trouble with the positions in this book, try it anyway, or like look for the ones you think you can do. Basically, making you do the work, having to do all that extra work instead of doing a little bit of the extra work herself to make the book just a little bit more inclusive, or maybe, God forbid, having a chapter on how to have sex for differently abled people. I mean, it just blows my mind that they would bother doing an edition for the 21st century, but not do anything to like bring the book into the 21st century at all. It's very frustrating.
It literally just like defined that people may not be heterosexual and that people might be into kinks and fetish. Like, it just gave definitions of each one of these things, but never actually explored or taught you how to do anything. Even the very light section on bondage, it's not like she was telling you, oh, like, use these knots. She mentioned one knot in the entire book, or it gave you nothing. It was just like, here's an idea, use ropes. Don't know how you're going to use them, but use a rope. Like, what is your purpose, book?
And it mentions bisexuality, but only in the context of, like, as a fun thing to spice up a hetero married couple's love life, which is totally ludicrous. Like, it mentions bisexuality as, like, you know, finding your bedroom unicorn plaything when you're in your 40s.
Weird. It's weird that
it
people
is like
still
fetishizing
treat people
and weird.
like that. Nobody ever does that. That's such a rare, unique take on that. I'm so angry. But okay, so Colin, you brought up that they were like trying to be inclusive for disability and old age, and they had an old age chapter. And I don't know if you noticed, but the entire thing did not talk about like reasons that women would be uncomfortable about aging. Like, it just didn't really...
Was it all boners?
Touch on that.
I didn't read it.
It was 100%. Like, the whole book is like... Hold on. So, yeah. So it says, women, make him feel comfortable about his struggle with, like, erections and help him out by doing some oral and handwork. And then, like, to men it says, don't worry, it's okay if you can't get erect. There are other ways to please your partner. The end. Like,
And then it doesn't talk about it.
it was just like, it was so... Men are gonna struggle if they don't feel virile. So, fix it. There's your old age chapter, bye!
Yeah, I think it was kind of like being in Mormon church for a second, being like in the women's group, being like, now you're going to have to support your man, so here's what you have to do, X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
So I don't know if our listeners know this or not, but it is very common in a lot of LDS wards when a young couple is about to get married that they will give kind of like a human sexuality course to the couple before they get married. And I imagine that human sexuality course that they get is basically this book.
I think that they are exactly the target audience for this book.
Yeah, and I don't want to drag Mormons specifically because I think, like...
No, it's
it's
Christian America. Like, the end.
Yeah. That's just the one that I have to go to because Utah.
Yeah.
That's where we're from.
That's whom we like to drag.
Hold, please.
Yeah.
One more. I swear.
Yes.
I'll stop. But I just needed to go to the section about deep throating.
Okay, sorry.
Because it explains how deep throating is done. And it's like, okay, women, like, take in as much as you can, and then breathe out, and then swallow, and then that's how you deep throat. And then it's like, okay, and now, man, you can start thrusting. Here's the direct quote. He needs to keep a little control to avoid being involuntarily bitten. No, he needs to have a little control because he is blocking some girl's airway right now, and he should probably focus on that. If that is your thing, that's fine. If you have the consent to, like, be in charge, there are plenty of times where in, like, a bondage exercise or something like that, you know, the woman opens her mouth and the man is the one who is fucking her mouth, and that's fine. That's great, but, like, pay attention to your partner because you are deep throating her and she might involuntarily gag. She might not be able to breathe for a long period of time. Like, there are things. So I agree with the book. You should definitely, like, have some awareness, keep a little in control, but it isn't about you getting your dick bitten off. It's about, oh, hey, my partner is in an uncomfortable position right now. Let me see that she's doing okay.
Here's why I don't agree with it, is because bondage, that is a specific situation where you've kind of consented, and you've talked about it before, because we've talked on this show, like, consent and having a conversation before bondage is super important. But for a lot of blowjob situations, like, I just can't imagine. I'm really thinking about a deep throat situation, and if the girl, or not the girl, if the person giving the blowjob doesn't have the freedom to, like, move their head, or especially if they're not used to deep throating, or if they have, like, hard gag reflexes, if a guy is thrusting into her, like, it's just not gonna. I can't see it going down well in a lot of situations. Like, if you've had that conversation beforehand about being tied up and having the control, that's fine. But if this, I don't know, it makes me super uncomfortable in a lot of situations.
And also, the book goes into ejaculating in someone's mouth, and it's like, it's 50-50 amongst experienced women whether or not they will swallow or whether or not you should ejaculate into your mouth. And then it goes, you can always ask. No, you should always ask.
No, you give a heads up. You always give like, I'm gonna come. Like, you have to vocalize that shit.
That is, yeah. No, it was like, you can always ask. No, book. It, like, really, this book does not care about consent at all. Because during the illness section, where it literally starts saying, one should never pressure oneself or pressure one's partner if suffering from illness. No, the sentence ends earlier. One should never pressure anyone ever. The end. Like, this book drives me mad.
Well, I mean, we did kind of unironically like it when we first started reading it. But that was before I had actually read anything.
I mean, if you don't actually read the book, it's fun. Like, I will say that as an honest review. Like, if you're just going through looking at the illustrations and the photos, and if you're looking for like new things to try out as far as a list goes.
No, I'm still not okay with it because all of the pictures were white couples. Like, I'm still not into it.
Yeah,
that is a fair criticism.
That really stuck out to me. Like, this is a book specifically targeted at white middle class hetero people, hetero married people. Like, it's very
with conservative values.
I would say with conservative values. It's disappointing, to say the least. Not surprising, unfortunately, but quite disappointing, especially because this is such a bestseller, and so many people. I can imagine all of the people who bought this expecting to see themselves reflected in it and were horribly disappointed.
Well, yeah. I think it's also interesting that the book was published in the UK in the 70s, because, like, I mean, America is pretty white. The UK is extremely white.
Yeah, but we're talking about the 2008 edition.
Yeah, which is even worse. Like, it makes it worse.
So no.
I mean,
like, if it was just the 70s one, then sure, fine. But by 2008, you didn't think that, like, having diversity would make the book better? And no, I'm not buying that.
I'm glad you bring that up, because this was a criticism of the book even back in the day. I'm currently looking at a review from 1975 that brings up exactly that, and it does talk about... so the name of the review is called The Joy of Sex, For Whom? By F.L. Marcuse in Etc., a review of general semantics. Side note, if I could work at the Institute of General Semantics, I don't think I've ever received a more clear calling than that. But I feel like I could be the chairman of the board of directors at the Institute of General Semantics. I love it. But yeah, it's called The Joy of Sex, For Whom? And it says in the second paragraph, this book will appeal and may only be applicable to the elite sexually, of the elite economically. It is directed at the jet set, the Volvo owners, chinchilla wearers, and those in the leisured class who have both the inclination and the time to explore. This, then, is a book for those in the cordon bleu and not for the McDonald, Colonel Sanders, or A&W crowd. So these criticisms were recognized at the time, so it's not like one of those things where you can excuse it for being a product of its time, because people back then knew better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And every single criticism of the book talks about how it is sex from a very specific man's perspective. And I'm not going to throw all men under the bus, because not all men think this way.
No, screw them.
But it
Fuck
is...
me.
Okay.
She does?
But, like, I'm thinking about the men that I know in my life, and I definitely know men who believe a lot of what this book says.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, this book is for them. And I am gonna remain positive and say that those particular men are not the majority of people I know. But they do exist, and I know a percentage of them, and it's sad. And I guess that's part of why I want to see this book kind of burn, because I don't think that those people should have their wrong beliefs justified.
Yeah, I mean, that's how those beliefs persist.
I was so excited when you said that it had been revised in 2008. I was so stoked. And then it just kind of stabbed you in the heart. That, like, even in 2008, it could get by with being this. You know? I don't know.
Yeah. So, Colin,
Mm-hmm.
may I read you a passage?
Actually, I had...
Oh,
yes.
Sorry, you're not done.
Or I was just going to say, I had one more thing from this...
I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. From this review that I think was relevant. Again, pointing out that these criticisms of the book have always existed. Probably the most glaring error of all is the book's constant sliding of the fact that differences both group and individual do, in fact, exist. And I think that quote right there just sums up the book. Like, you don't need to read any more than that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Anyway, that's all I had to say on
Yeah.
that matter.
Yep. Yarp.
Megan, what are you reading to Colin? I'm intrigued.
Yeah, what are you telling?
I'm curious.
Okay.
Tell us.
Women, like men, have direct physical responses. Sure, science proves that we get turned on just as much as you, and as quickly. It's simply that traditionally we have been discouraged. But our triggers are different. Breasts and skin first, please, not a direct grab at the clitoris. And can't be short-circuited. It matters to us who is doing what far more than it does to men.
Yeah, I mean, this whole book is just full of essentialist talk like that.
Colin, may I ask you a question?
Yes.
Does it matter to you who sexually stimulates you?
Yes, I would say very much. I would say that is the number one factor.
So it's not a situation of any woman can come up to you naked. Like, imagine we're not dating.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine we're not together. We're not dating anymore. We're married.
Hashtag newlyweds.
Imagine you're single. Could anyone, literally anyone, come up to you and you would have sex with them?
What? No. Buy a guy a drink first.
So, like, where does that belief fucking come from in this book?
Well, wait, hold on. What are you asking?
Like, why is that in this book that is supposed to be about human sexuality, written by fucking doctors?
Yes.
Like
Dr. Sex, no less.
Even with some of the more sexist guys I know, they still have a type. Like, they're not just gonna have sex with literally anyone. Like, how did doctors have such a complete misread
Gender
on
norms.
male sexuality?
Yeah.
Gender norms.
Gender norm. Yeah. I mean, I think Marcella is exactly right. We tend to think of medicine, in particular, and science as a whole as something that is apolitical and sort of like this monolith that can't be touched, but that's completely false. Like, even things as seemingly esoteric as computer programs are influenced by the way we view gender or race or class and all of that stuff. So to say that, no, that's all that I wanted to say.
It's all of these little ways that people are just like, oh, yeah, the men do these things and the women do these things. And it's just so ingrained in this book. It's just like, men are just in the sex for the physical pleasure, and women all about the feels and emotions. Kill me.
So I do want to read something that kind of made me happy. Like, I like this quote. When it comes to penises, it's less the size than its personality. I kind of like that. Like, what's hot about a penis is the personality attached to it. And you know what? For me, that has always been true. I like the personality the most.
I loved that they brought in, like, the jokes section.
Yeah.
Where it was like, yeah, like, this should be fun. It should be about play. I like that they bring that in, that, like, laughter. Awkward things happen during sex. It's not all the movies, okay, guys? So if you have a partner that you can, like, laugh with, that's great. Do I think that you have to be in a long, ongoing romantic relationship in order for that to happen? No. If you're gonna sleep with someone, even if it's a one-night stand, I hope it's somebody that, like, made you laugh while you were on your date and you felt comfortable with. Like, I am all for one-night stands. I will not shame people for doing them. But, yeah, like I said, like, it doesn't have to, none of these things have to be attached to a long, many-year relationship. Okay. I'm glad that we're ending with, like, a few things that we did like, and because I thought you guys liked this book, I tried really hard to find things that were good. And I think I found 5.
Nice. I mean, that's
Right.
pretty good.
You tried. Tell us your 5 things.
Two of them are basically related, but of course they gendered it, which is whatever. For the male orgasm, if you're having trouble like getting to the orgasm, they mentioned to change your breathing and to try shorter breaths, and that shorter breaths can actually help you. That's an interesting fact. I don't have a penis. I don't know if that's true, but cool. And then for the female orgasm, they said it's just about switching your breathing. So if you're a person who's like holding your breath and you can't orgasm, try faster breaths. Or if you're like breathing really passionately, try holding your breath, which is when I was really excited because it said, for some, arousal is linked not to breathing, but actively to not breathing, which I was like, heck yes, because that's how you get people who are into breath play. Absolutely. Now, it immediately pissed me off because the end of that sentence is, even if your partner asks for you to limit their airway, don't do it. And I'm like, okay, there are safe ways of doing that. Like, it's all about building a relationship and feeling comfortable with your partner. So no, you're wrong. But I was like really excited that there's like scientific backing for the whole whole breath play, basically.
So I think the reason they put that in there in the second revision of the book, they had to add a lot of legal statements in there, which is why they cut the part about having sex on a moving motorcycle. That's why they added the things about like don't limit a person's airplay, because I have a feeling that someone did it the wrong way and it ended in a lawsuit.
I just don't understand what the difference between telling people not to do something and telling people to research the safe way of doing something is.
I would say that the way to research a safe way to do it is to get an actual book on breath play or to seek out a professional.
Sure, but the book told you, the book has an entire section on resources. So why didn't it just say, hey, if you're going to do this, it's very dangerous. Look at these resources. So I won't give it that. If it's going to give me resources for other things that I'm allowed to do, I'm not going to be like, oh, it's dangerous, so they just said it's a legal matter. No, I won't give it to them. No.
Okay, here is my favorite thing about The Joy of Sex. So this book came out in the 70s. Despite the fact that it sold millions upon millions of copies, it had a lot of pushback. There were a lot of critics of the book, and what immediately followed were other books on human sexuality and sex books. This one, the reason we started with it is because I'm not going to say it was first, because you have things that are much older than this, like the Kama Sutra. But in terms of trying to be, what's the word I'm looking for? Approachable to
white America?
Yeah, to white America. It was one of the earlier ones. Actually, I would say that Dr. Kinsey's two books were first, because those sold like crazy.
And chronologically, they were.
And also, they came out in 1948 and 1953, respectively.
Yeah.
So,
no, but it did. You're right, Megan. Like, this was the beginning of the sexual revolution. Like, it did have a contributing factor to that.
Can I interject?
Yes, please.
While I'm thinking about it, I'm also looking at a review of the 2008 edition from when it came out. So this is from the New York Times, an article called "Revising Sex for the 21st Century" by Sarah Leal, published December 17th, 2008. So we skip down to the second or third paragraph, and it's okay. So the book has undergone various tweaks and expansions over the years, and 6 years ago, the hairy man and his somewhat less hairy female partner were relegated to wherever old hippies go to retire. Now comes a completely revised version of the book. Okay, sorry. Just listen to how this person characterizes the book. Now comes a completely revised version of the book written for the first time for women as much as for men. It tackles an array of modern topics unheard of in the 1970s, like internet pornography, AIDS, and Viagra, and features photographs and drawings, when things get too graphic, of a suitably buff 21st century couple. So, this just blows my mind that...
The New York Times published that?
Yes.
Well, no, it's on the back of the cover. Like, it says, answers questions no one had in 1972, ellipsis, this time through the eyes of a woman too. And end quote.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it just blows my mind that a professional book reviewer would say that
And like
in
even
2008.
all of them on the back, they have
But it was a boy.
No, it was Sarah.
Really?
I don't know their gender, but I
One to assume.
Sarah Lyall.
That's
Yeah,
sad.
it was sad. She even interviews the new editor, Susan Quilliam.
I will point out that the back of the cover of this book has reviews from New York Times, NPR, The New Yorker,
Yeah.
Washington Post, and Men's Health.
Yeah, all paragons of exactly to whom this book is written. There's the white liberal middle class establishment who don't have to think about anything.
You know what's fun about this? It's in our Facebook cover photo.
Yes.
It's part of our branding.
It is. It
The
is.
surge of rage that I just felt. I think I'm gonna cry.
It's before we read it. Before we even knew what it was about, really.
I have legitimate tears welling in my eyes.
Yeah. And I think at the end of the day, I would not recommend this book. It sets out to be like The Joy of Cooking, but for sex. A kind of catch-all manual for everybody, and fails in that regard. Clearly because of the prejudices of the people who wrote it. And in fact, I think, if we look into the life of Alex Comfort a little bit, we can understand how the book ended up the way it was. So, he writes this book, and it becomes very, very popular. He ends up being known as Dr. Sex, a nickname that he doesn't really like, but he divorces his wife after the book becomes popular, moves in with his mistress.
Sure.
Right. Whom he's been having an affair with for like 10 years, and then they go to this like free love commune. Yeah, so
He should read The Ethical Slut?
Yeah, he ends up going to this like 1970s free love commune, and the mistress ends up not liking it because of course she doesn't, because of the whole 70s like sexual revolution again was all about men, and the whole free love thing wasn't free love. It was just like giving men access to sexually to a lot of different women. Like that's what it boiled.
Yep.
That's what these like 70s nudist colonies not nudist colonies. I don't want to drag them into this, but these sort of like free love things. That's what it all boils down to. Is that it was just a sexual revolution for men. Oh, I didn't even mention the weirdest thing about him. He only had he was missing 3 fingers on his left hand. Did I say that?
You know, for someone who was missing so many fingers, he had a very
Ableist sex book? Yeah, weird.
I think there's one really good quote that could be a good wrap-up.
How about it?
The book included a section, which I don't have the research that it's based off of, but I think it's important to say, we now know through competent research that sex education actively raises the age at which adolescents first have sex and lowers the amount of partners they have and the number of risks they take. Which is kind of why we're here.
Yep. Thanks, Joy of Sex, I guess.
I'll give it that.
Now, I do want to put in a positive note at the end of this. We will be doing book club, or a book report. Book report! Again. And next time we are reading The Ethical Slut. This is my gift to you, Marcella, after putting you through this hell.
Oh, honey, you're so cute. You think I haven't already read it.
I know you've read it.
It's my manual to life.
I know you've read it, but then you get to have a conversation about something you like next time.
Yeah, it's less painful. I'm excited to reread it, though. I am.
Mm-hmm. Colin, would you like to pitch all of our social medias?
Oh, yeah. Hey, everybody. We have social media, and we've been forgetting to tell you about it, so please like and subscribe.
Yeah, follow us on the Facebooks or the Instagrams or the Twitter.
Yeah, you can find us at on Twitter at remedialsexed. You can find, I think the handle is the same for Insta, remedialsexed. For Facebook, we are Remedial Sex Podcast because Facebook's filters would not allow me to call it Remedial Sex Ed for some reason, but you can find us pretty easily. So yeah, follow us. We like to post dumb things on social media.
They're not dumb. They're hilarious. I love them.
I like to post great things on social media. I like to post dumb things on social media. Let me be clear.
It's all fun times.
Yeah.
It's great.
So please follow us. Oh, and please leave us a review. It helps us out a lot, and we will shout you out.
Yes.
In fact, I will, if you write us a review, I will write you a poem up to 400 words on a topic of your choosing. What I want you to do is leave the review, screenshot that bad boy, email the screenshot to remedialsexed@gmail with the subject you want me to write you the poem about, and I will write you a poem.
Wow.
I'm into it.
Can I do that?
Yeah, you can do it. I mean, yes. I don't know. It seems like it's uncool to leave a review, an iTunes review for your own podcast.
She just wants a poem.
Oh, you just...
Yeah. It's cute that you didn't get that, but great.
I'm Megan, I guess.
I'm somehow still here, and Marcella.
I'm Dr. Susan Quilliam Comfort.
Thank you for joining us. Don't read Joy of Sex.
Never. It broke us all. Bye.
Bye. Love you.
Contribute to the rearing of a mature person.
An absence of
Oh, yeah, you don't have to be thinking about sex.